I was here at Hunter when Professor Jonathan Rosenberg stopped in my office to share his newly published first book on America and world affairs. And he handed me a copy of the book. I was pleased, but I was curious about why I would be particularly interested in it. I'm not an Americanist, and he picked up on that cue, and he said, well, Madam Pandit. It took me a bit to connect that Madam Pandit was Vijaya Lakshmi Pandit, Nehru's sister. So I started to explore, and what I found is she literally wasn't anywhere. So that led me on a quest that produced my last book called The Peacemakers, where she featured. But I told my partner, what I really want to do is I want to write a biography of Vijaya Lakshmi Pandit, and I would like to do it for Penguin. A few weeks later, Penguin wrote to me out of the blue and said, would you like to write a biography of Vijaya Lakshmi Pandit for us? And I just took this as an incredible cosmic sign. There's a whole movement in India and in the field in general to explore biography, and so I'm happy to have been on the pioneering cusp of that. Vijaya Lakshmi Pandit, known as Madam Pandit, worked alongside Mahatma Gandhi on anti-colonial campaigns and went to prison for it several times. She was India's first woman cabinet minister, the first woman ambassador to the United States. She was India's first ambassador to the United Nations and the first woman president of the UN General Assembly. It's a set of titles, but that doesn't really tell us who she was or what she did. She's someone I like to think of as everywhere all at once. She is detained by the police for the attempted assassination of Mussolini. She works with the likes of Charles de Gaulle, Madame Chang. She tells Kennedy not to go to Dallas. Robert Oppenheimer turns to her to ask for her assistance to prevent nuclear annihilation. W.E.B. Du Bois said that she was someone who was responsible for the successful assault on the color line. So that's who she was, someone who championed race justice and gender equality and set the precedent for human rights. I visited over 40 archives in 7 countries and used material in 5 languages, and this took 8 years. I also interviewed numerous people. So I had to sift through tens of thousands of documents. Every archive, no matter how complete it might be, is still, in a sense, missing pieces of the story. Some of this is intentional. They left it out because they don't want to tell the story, and some of it is unintentional. Vijaya Lakshmi Pandit's story is not well known, not just because she's a woman, but because she winds up coming out of retirement to battle her own niece. Indira Gandhi declares a state of emergency in India in 1975. And when Indira Gandhi suspends democracy, Madam Pandit is under house arrest, and her daughter, Nayanthara Sehgal, one of India's most eminent writers, releases a story here under a pseudonym, Azad, which means freedom. And she sort of lets the cat out of the bag. And it is the spark that Madam Pandit needs. She comes out of retirement swinging, and she goes hard at her niece. She leads the campaign against her, and Indira Gandhi is taken aback by the international criticism and ends up declaring new elections because she thinks she's going to win. And so her aunt and her compete. Her aunt is leading the opposition, and they win. But Indira Gandhi is reelected in 1980. When she comes back, she's very upset at her aunt and vindictively has her scrubbed from the public record. So that's part of the reason why people don't know about her. I think that there are some very careful choices that have to be made by the writer of a biography. I also made sure to try to take into account the views of friends and foes alike. What makes her impressive is the fact that she had struggles. It is her humanity that makes her so inspiring and relatable. The book released just before Christmas in India. I did signings and did launch events, and one of my friends over there sent a clipping. The Asian Age has a prestigious bestseller list in nonfiction, and it had hit number 3. And it stayed on the list for the first 2 months of its release. Right now, it's only a South Asia release. So we are looking for partners in the West who might be interested in sharing this story over here. The internationalist ideals of the 30s, 40s, and 50s was a world where the infrastructure of human rights would protect people all over the world, whatever kind of state that they lived in. At our moment in history, those kinds of ideals might seem far, but only a few years ago, the word globalization was on everyone's lips. Certain complementing elements of globalization involving the economy, crises, and conflict have fed instability, and democracies have been very flat-footed in being able to respond, in part because the problems themselves are beyond any one state. We need more international structure to deal with the problem, but people's faith in democracy is eroding, and the impulse is to go towards more authoritarian figures who promise to act fast. But they can't because the problems are beyond any one state. So international cooperation is basically our only way forward. And Madam Pandit's vision and work over her career and those of her generation still hold true as pathways that we need.
Queer folks have had to fight for their own space in the world and recreate a social structure and expectation. There's this script of how we're supposed to interact in the world, and queer folks immediately don't fit into that script. So what is our script? We get to define it. And I think that's where we started also questioning the concept of monogamy. My name is Ash Oliver. I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I've been working in the field of therapy for over 10 years now, and for almost 3 years, I've had my own online practice focusing on queer folks, queer therapy, polyamory, that I've named Transcend Queer Therapy. I think nowadays most people would use polyamory as the umbrella term, which I think can get a little confusing. I tend to define polyamory as having multiple attached or romantic relationships, which means there is a deeper level of connection, more so than maybe casual or like friends with benefits type of thing. So folks who do like open relationships or ethical non-monogamy might not have those type of prioritized multiple relationships. It could be a sexual orientation and or romantic orientation. I've seen folks be wired more non-monogamous, and I've seen people wired monogamous, and both of those are valid. And I've seen people approach it as a lifestyle. Some people refer to themselves as like ambiamorous, meaning that depending on their situation, they're cool with non-monogamy or monogamy. So I think that's a really individualized choice. People use all sorts of labels. Some people will just have what they call an open relationship or friends with benefits. There's solo polyamory, where people would refer to themselves as their priority and main relationships. A new thing I'm hearing a lot about is relationship anarchy. Basically, like your relationship is determined by you and your partner only, not like a metamor. Metamor basically means your partner's partner. And then hierarchy can be a touchy topic nowadays. You know, someone might be your primary partner and they take precedence in your life, and then people might use terms like secondary or tertiary. I like to talk about realistic hierarchy in my practice because there is hierarchy in somewhere in your life. Like if you have kids, your kids ought to be your priority. There's the inherent hierarchy within that. A lot of folks, I think, engage in non-monogamy because we are trying to have a sense of like freedom that we may not have experienced before, and also creating like a chosen family. And you see that a lot in queer communities in general. So we want to not recreate the toxic family relationships that we're trying to heal from.
For years, unfortunately, I lived a very monogamous, heterosexual, normative life. And through the process of trying to adhere to heterosexuality and monogamy, I realized that in my core, it wasn't always quite for me. My name is Carolyn Tony. I write erotica and I write fiction, and I love talking about relationships, sex, and trying to break the stigma on what it means to be intimate and different types of intimacy. For the most part of my dating life, I was a serial dater. And mind you, throughout all those times, there was always something with this person that didn't work quite right. So in 2015, I broke up with my ex. And like before, I assumed that I'll find somebody, no problem. And then reality set in. that dating is not easy as it once was. People don't necessarily want to meet you anymore. People just want to f you. I was constantly having bad date after bad date, and I started writing about it because it was a form of therapy for me. I started writing Tales of Tony as a blog, and then I joined the writing group, and they would discuss like swinger parties and sex parties, and I was just like, that sounds like fun. I'm not looking for a serious relationship right now, so why not consider trying it? But I never considered it because I didn't think it was something real that could happen. And again, it's not as if people walk down the street holding hands in triplets, right? But when I finally joined the group and I heard a lot of people more talking about it and being honest about it, and I was like, oh, this is a real option for me. And it kind of clicked that maybe that's why all these relationships, there was always something that was wrong, because I was expecting one person to be my everything. It was unfair to them, and it was also unfair for me to also have to contort to be everything that they wanted me to be. When I entered into the world of swinger, I wasn't looking for a relationship. I did not want to date. My partner, who became my boyfriend, saw me in action. I told him from jump when we started dating that I was with two other people. He was okay with it. It worked really great for our dynamic. Polyamory has to be ethical and equal for both people. Either you both have the same guidelines that can opt out in and out of it with consent to each other, or it's not going to work. It was really important for me to make sure that I didn't get lost in the sea of polyamory. If you don't know what you really want, you're just all over the place and doing a bunch of different things you may not want to do. So now it's just me loving my toys right now. I have a partner, they're not the one, but the sex is great. I'm still trying to do this dating thing. I'm not beholden to it because, like I said, I have a lot of loves in my life already that give me satisfaction in different ways, and it doesn't have to be romantic and intimate love.